So I don't really know what this is gonna be, but I've had this wild idea for a while, and I just want to see like what it becomes. Okay. So welcome to Not Penny's podcast, which is going to be a Lost rewatch podcast, but with a twist. Not like all the other Lost rewatch podcasts out there. This one's a little bit different because I am one of your hosts. I am Michael. However, I am a big time, massive Lostie. Like, I watched the show from broadcast to finale, on air, live, never missed a week. You didn't call me. If you called me during Lost, somebody better be dead. That was me for that 5 6 year period. So I've watched it a couple of times in rewatches.
Lost you.
Oh yeah, I've
Okay.
watched it. I've watched this thing like 3 or 4 times, like through just rewatches. But my co-host has never watched Lost before.
Never, ever, ever. Not
Uh,
a single time.
yeah, it's I've been wanting to do this show for a while. Um, because it was just this crazy idea. Like, I kind of, in a way, stole it from a friend of mine, but not exactly. He had an idea for a wrestling podcast, but it was going to be a watch along podcast where you actually watched it was going to be like split video with them on the bottom and the wrestling on the top. And he was going to get people that were not wrestling fans and just invite them over for like a game night and not tell them what's happening. And then when they get there, essentially trap them and make them watch wrestling and talk about it as it's playing. And it was called captive. He was going to call it captive audience, and I thought that was hysterical.
That's
And
kind of brilliant.
I
That is
like
brilliant.
some of that's crazy, but I like that one part about watching this with someone who's never watched it. And I was like, this would be a really good way to watch Lost because while you're watching the show for the first time, I get to watch the show alongside you for the first time. And I get to share in all of the what is going on here. Like, wait, what happened? Like, who is this? Like, all of that. I get to be there, I get to there for and all these big reveals. And any of you that are listening to this that have watched Lost before, you know what I'm talking about when I see these big reveals. Now, this was just going to be our intro episode where we're just kind of talking, introducing ourselves, talking about what the show is going to be and everything. But I get to watch alongside you, like all these big reveals. And when, Jack eventually grows that ugly beard, and I get to be there for all of that. I get to be there. People that have watched Lost are going to get this, and you're going to have no clue what I'm talking about. I get to be there when you get to experience Razzle Dazzle for the first time.
See, I hear razzle dazzle and I think of like Liza Minnelli. So like
Mm,
hearing that in terms of Lost,
unfortunately, it
I'm
is not.
intrigued.
It is not Liza Minnelli. No, it is. Every shows have perfect episodes. For this one, it's a season 4 episode called "The Constant." But
Okay.
you know, uh, but then shows have bad episodes, and Lost was not immune from that. For every constant, there was a expose. So that's where we get razzle dazzle. So you'll get to hear all about that and see it when we get there. And trust me, when we get there, you're going to go, wait, who is that? And you'll see why when we get there. Because here's the thing. You have promised to not Google.
I have. I solemnly swear I will not
Yep.
Google at
Because
all.
you accidentally Googled something and
I
you were
did.
like, apparently there's a funeral at the end. And I'm like, stop reading. Like, stop
Well, that
Googling
and
me.
that and okay, so what I had Googled so no, the funeral at the end was me remembering when the finale first aired and everybody was big mad, but my Google
They're all
listener
big mad. We're all big everyone's still big
I
mad.
I I know, I made the mistake about posting about it on Threads, okay?
Oh my god. She's no.
No, no, I haven't since ever most of the people have been very supportive and very, very excited to be experiencing it for the first time, whereas they have seen it and either they're warning me or they're going, "Oh my god, enjoy the ride." Like, but the
Yeah,
Googling came in when I was Googling Cloverfield
that was it.
and the connection to Cloverfield. It was Cloverfield.
There was an
Yeah.
yes, because that is part of the J.J. Abrams universe.
Yes.
And we're
It's
gonna
the
get more
Abrams
we're gonna
verse.
get more into JJ when we get to the pilot episode because we're really gonna talk about how this was this show shouldn't have gotten picked up, really. So, we'll get to that though. So, yeah, you have promised to not Google. If you have legitimate questions, like you don't understand
No,
something, you can ask me. So, and I can try to explain
of
it the best
course.
I can without spoiling things because there are going to be a few things here because we're going to watch these episodes. We're going to talk back and forth about, okay, what did you like? Oh my God, what about this? Da, da, da. We're going to do all that. And I have to be careful with what I say because I don't want to spoil something for you long before it gets revealed. The one thing I always tell people, and this is not really a spoiler, it's to prep you just mentally. Do not, under any circumstances, get attached to Walt. It is one of the most contentious things in the entire fandom of this show. Th and we will get to it. It will take a minute, but we'll get there, and we'll just kind of go over, like, what all of that was. Because that one, this show has a lot of unanswered questions. But
Okay.
what was Walt or, like, what was Walt's deal is, like, the biggest one. That is the number one question, and they tried their best to answer it the best they could, and we just have to say, "You know what? Like, it was what it was," and I'll tell you what it was when we get to it. It was what it was, and you just have to say, "Okay, I'm not getting closure there," and move on. So, just don't get attached to Walt. That's the one thing I'll tell you going in. Um, yeah, so but so from what Lost is to me, Stranger Things is to you.
Stranger Things is my life, yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't say Lost
Yeah.
is my life, but for about 5 years there, it was. It was my life.
Mhm.
You didn't talk to me because it mostly was on Thursdays, I think. But whatever night it was on, if it moved around, trust me, I was there. And you didn't call me. You didn't bother me. You didn't come to my house. Like my friends knew. Don't bug me. Matter of fact,
Mhm.
I was in a show because I've been a performer for 30 years. I was in a show while Lost was airing, that season was going, and it was like maybe the second to last episode of I think of like season 4. And in the dressing room, I had found a Lost forum that essentially was, "Hey, aren't home to watch Lost, but want to essentially have it spoiled and described to you in real time, like scene by scene." And I was like, "You know what? I'm not
Uh-huh.
gonna watch this episode before I get home tonight. I'm not gonna get home till late." So I did it. And I was like so even then, I was, like, keeping up with Lost in rehearsals. So if I was backstage, I was back there on my phone, like, scrolling. Like, I'm not kidding. I was dead serious about it.
That's kind of genius.
I'm just
That's
saying.
kind of genius.
I'm just saying when
Okay.
and that's one thing, we can talk about this in the intro because, we just talk about Lost in general. Before Lost came along at a time where the internet was changing, and we were going more digital than we had ever been, and of course, we get the iPhone, and we got the
Mhm.
iPod, and we got that first iPod that was actually capable of playing video on it, one of the old school ones. Lost was one of the first TV shows to be ever put on sale episodically through iTunes. And it's
For
also,
real?
yeah, for real.
That's
For
awesome.
yeah, and also before Lost, there were people out there that had podcasts that I listened to. Like I listened to Jay and Jack. I can't remember the name of the couple that was actually in Hawaii, and we can get into him because he was a little bit of a troublemaker. He essentially
Was he the one you were texting me about the other night? Last
maybe
night?
yes, I think yes, yes. Okay, so I
Yes.
can talk about this
Yes,
without
okay.
spoiling what actually happened. Okay, so he's local to Hawaii, and he would in Hawaii, public beaches are public property.
Mhm.
So even in filming, you can't close off access to the beach. So wherever they were filming, they were so remote away from like where all the beach goers were, so that they wouldn't have randos in the back of their shots. So he found out
Mhm.
the beach that they were at because there's nothing they could do. They can't like he as long as he's not bothering anybody, he's not breaking any laws, they can't do anything. So he was one of the first like lost bloggers, and he was spoiling shit left and right. And in one of the seasons, and when we get there, I'll tell you what it was. When we get
Mhm.
one of the seasons, he was spoiling like massive plot points. And so for one season in one of the episodes, they filmed the real air version that would air. And then they filmed like 4 decoys. And they caught him because they caught the person that leaked on the show that leaked one of the decoys, because they didn't know what the real one was. So nobody did. So they ended up sharing one of the decoys, and they were able to trace it back. And that's how they caught him. It was like yeah, that's where we were with this show. But also, it was one of the first shows to have an official podcast. Like, everybody now has got, oh, you got this after the show podcast. I'm pretty sure there's a Stranger Things podcast. And
Probably, I think
yeah,
so.
there's gotta be. And they were one of the first ones. Like the guy that did the whole thing, hosted it, went essentially to ABC and was like, hey, these people are hosting these podcasts. And so we should do that and be like, make an official Lost podcast. And their first question was, "What's a podcast?" Because that was so turn of that in that generation that we were getting to share our this love for things through a medium that was in its infancy. And that's, the one year I went to San Diego Comic Con was for the last time that Lost would have their panel, because the Lost panel was always huge. Um, and I was one of the people that was out in the aisle because you had to camp out to get into that one. So I was out there, and at like 3 in the morning, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, the main showrunners of Lost, came around with pizza and donuts and were giving them to the people in line. And because they just wanted to say thank you to the people that made the show like what it was. And I was like, that's so freaking cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we a little bit of how the show is going to go. Unlike other Lost podcasts, we are not going to go one for one episodic. There's 120, I think it's 121 episodes of Lost. That's a lot. That's a lot of podcast recording. And even at at a rate of a one a week, that still puts us at over a two years of recording. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. So we are going to, some episodes will get their own episodes, like the pilot episode, the next show you're going to hear, hu- will get its own episode. But then, like maybe the next 2 or next 3 in season 1, and the rest of the seasons going through, will get lumped together, still staying in broadcast order so that the story stays, in order. But we're going to lump a few things together. just kind of cut down on how many episodes of this we will have to do to get through the entire series. But like season premieres, season finales, and then there will be some standalone episodes in here that I'm gonna call that we do a solo episode on those, so that because there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to talk about in those episodes. But I, as the person that knows Lost like the back of my hand, um, I I have to steer, or I have to be the one out here skirting around spoilers as I answer things, and especially when we get into these episodes, when I'm explaining stuff, and I don't want to even overshare something that maybe not even be a spoiler, but something that I'd rather you discover on your own. Um, but I will promise this. I will not lie. If you guess how this show ends
Friends don't lie.
3 episodes in, if you guess how this show ends 3 episodes in, I'll have to dance around it to keep you going. But like, it's going to be hard to not, because I won't lie. I won't deliberately deceive you. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, if you're onto
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
I won't lie to you to get you off the trail, because I don't mind if you figure things out. I don't really. That's part of the fun. But
I was gonna say that's part of the fun, that's part of the journey.
yeah, that's part of this. Yeah, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
But uh I want you to, I want you to discover things on your own, but I don't want to even overshare or just steer you wrong if you get too close to right. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this goes. But that's going to do it for this episode. I really just wanted to be like, here, this is us. We're doing this thing. So if you liking what you've heard, check the next episode is going to be all about the pilot, the most expensive 2 hours in television history until I think it was Boardwalk Empire finally was more expensive. But it was one of the most expensive pilots up until just not very, very long ago. But next episode is going to be all about the pilot. So stay tuned for that. If you like the show, make subscribe. I'm going to be getting everything out on every podcast platform that I can think of. So Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Amazon Music. I've got a few others that people suggested. So I'm going to get them out to everybody, and we'll share those links out as we can. But for now, the best place to find the show is on Spotify. And because you'll catch every episode there until we get everything distributed out. But thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you here on the next episode of Not Pennies Podcast.